You open your phone, notifications, messages, a heart emoji from someone you haven't seen in months, a "you okay?" text from someone who never waits for your answer. Someone tagged you in a memory 5 years ago today. You scroll, you reply, you type haha when you're not laughing, you like something just so the thread doesn't die. We've been trained to confuse contact with connection. The more access we have to each other, the less present we seem to be. The more we talk, the less we say. The more we share, the less we're actually seen. Maybe you've felt it, that hollow ache after a long chat, that odd fatigue after a night of keeping up the banter. You said the right things. You used the right emojis. You played your part. But something in you didn't get fed. Something in you dimmed. You think, is it me? Have I become antisocial? Why does everything feel so forced lately? But it's not you. It's the system you're moving through. This is not intimacy. This is performance. We're all actors now, not on a stage, but in inboxes, comment sections, private chats, group threads. We curate concern. We schedule empathy. We manufacture presence. The modern relationship is built on responsiveness, not resonance. On speed, not depth. You reply fast, so you must care. You check in often, so you must be close. But ask yourself honestly, when was the last time someone really saw you? Like actually saw through your smile, noticed the tension in your voice, paused when your "I'm fine" didn't sound quite right. When was the last time you did that for someone else? This isn't a question of effort. You're exhausted, you're trying, that's the thing. You're spending emotional bandwidth on people every day, but you still feel alone. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all. You're giving more than ever and feeling less in return. We're stuck in a cycle of emotional transactions. I'll listen to you vent if you validate me. I'll cheer you up if you stay in my life. I'll be the stable one if you don't abandon me. These are unspoken contracts, and we sign them constantly, not because we're manipulative, but because we're afraid. Afraid of being forgotten, afraid of being seen as selfish, afraid of being alone. But let's be clear, this is not real closeness. This is emotional labor, and more often than not, it's invisible, especially if you're someone who's always there for others. You probably don't even notice it anymore. How you contort your tone to avoid conflict, how you downplay your needs so others feel comfortable, how you reply even when you're depleted just so no one feels rejected. You think you're being a good friend, and maybe you are, but you're also being a very busy actor in a play that never ends. And the stage isn't even yours. The script is written by algorithms, market incentives, and unhealed wounds. You're just improvising, trying to make everyone feel something while you feel nothing at all. This is what philosopher Michel Foucault warned us about, a society of soft control, where we regulate each other not through punishment, but expectation. You're not forced to reply. You're not punished for being slow to respond, but you feel guilty. You feel inadequate. You feel like a bad friend, and so you perform. Again and again. Sociologist Arlie Hochschild called it emotional labor. The unseen work of managing feelings to maintain social harmony. It's what you do when you smile during a fight, when you say no worries even though you're hurt, when you comfort someone while quietly collapsing inside. And in the digital age, this labor never ends. There's no clock out, no boundary, no off switch. Your phone is a portal into hundreds of unclosed emotional tabs, each one asking for a piece of you. And what do you get in return? A like, a meme, a lol, you're so right. These are not acts of care. They are echoes bouncing around a hollow room we now call friendship. And yet, we cling to them. We call them connection. We convince ourselves that the people who double tap our stories must care, that the friend who sends funny videos but never asks how we are must still love us, that this, all of this, must count for something. But what if it doesn't? What if the intimacy we think we have is an illusion? Philosopher Jean Baudrillard spoke of this. In a world oversaturated with signs and simulations, the real begins to vanish. We no longer see things as they are. we see them as they're represented. A kiss becomes a selfie. A memory becomes a highlight reel. A friendship becomes a thread of blue bubbles. You're not connecting with people. You're connecting with their curated selves, their avatars, their projections. And they're connecting with yours. It's no wonder we're tired. Because deep down, we don't just want attention. We want recognition. We want someone to say, "I see you." Not the mask, not the performance, you. But we're too afraid to show ourselves. Because in a world that rewards charisma over vulnerability, what happens when you reveal your raw self and no one claps? So we retreat, we script, we sanitize, we become what we think people need us to be. Reliable, agreeable, emotionally available, but never too heavy. And the tragedy is, even when we're surrounded by people, we feel utterly. We post something vulnerable and watch it get ignored. We reach out and get a busy RN in response. We share something that matters and someone replies with a heart emoji, like that substitutes for presence. And yet, we go back. Because something in us still believes, still hopes, still aches for connection. But hope alone won't save us from the machine we're inside. Because this illusion, this system of half connections and emotional multitasking, wasn't built to nurture you. It was built to keep you engaged. It profits off your loneliness. It feeds on your availability. You are not a friend in this economy. You are a user. And your attention, your care, your presence, they're all being harvested, not just by apps, but by people too. People who don't know how to ask for love, so they take it in likes. People who never learn to sit in silence, so they fill the void with constant noise. People who've mistaken emotional access for emotional safety. And maybe you've been one of them. Maybe we all have. So what now? What do you do when you realize most of your relationships are built on borrowed attention and mutual exhaustion? You don't cut everyone off. You don't delete every thread. That's not healing. That's another performance. Instead, you start small. You tell the truth. You say, "I'm tired." You say, "I need some space." You say, "I want depth, not updates." You notice who disappears and who leans in. You stop replying out of guilt. You start responding from truth. You let go of the need to be everywhere for everyone, and you learn to be present, deeply, painfully present, with just a few. You trade the performance of connection for the risk of real intimacy. And it is a risk, because when you stop performing, people will leave. Not because you're wrong, but because they were never really with you, just with the version of you that played the role they needed. But the ones who stay, they'll know you. Not your profile, not your timing, you. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you'll feel less alone. Because you were never too much. You were just too honest for a world addicted to the illusion of closeness. This isn't friendship. This isn't care. This isn't love. This is emotional maintenance disguised as meaning. This is not intimacy. This is survival. You laugh with them, you reply fast, you're always included in the plans, and yet something gnaws at you on the ride home. Something silent, something sharp. It doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like absence in the middle of presence, like being spoken to without ever being heard. This isn't social anxiety. It's not about being introverted. It's something deeper. You've followed the rules. You've shown up. You've smiled in the right moments, laughed when expected, shared enough to be open, but not enough to be too much. Still, you leave the room feeling untouched, like you were never really in it, not as you, and maybe you weren't. Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." He was right. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being unreceived. It's about having truths too big for small talk, feelings too layered for quick reactions, a depth that doesn't fit into notifications or nods. The ache begins when you realize that no one has ever truly sat with you at your most inward. Most of what we call friendship is actually a performance of cohesion. We meet, we smile, we sync up like devices, we update each other like interfaces. but we don't connect, not really, because connection requires stillness, and most people aren't ready to be still. Stillness demands presence, vulnerability, mutual risk, and that's not how the world is built anymore. So we keep socializing even as we empty out. We show up even when our soul wants to be elsewhere. We answer messages even when we have nothing real left to say. We're terrified of isolation, but we rarely consider the cost of pretending we're not already there. Jung believed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But how could we, when so much of our time is spent being digestible to others, when every truth we withhold becomes a brick in the wall between who we are and who we perform, when every "I'm good" chips away at our ability to be known? Loneliness begins when you start watching yourself play a part and no one notices it's a performance. You tell a story and laugh, and no one hears the pain under the humor. You give advice but secretly need to fall apart. You're reliable, present, helpful, but you've forgotten how to need. Because need makes you visible, and visibility makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability, in a world that rewards the curated self, feels dangerous. So we settle for gestures, we settle for being liked, we settle for messages with heart emojis instead of visits, calls that don't go past 10 minutes, conversations that orbit our lives but never land. We trade resonance for recognition, depth for accessibility, truth for compatibility. But no one tells you the cost until it's too late, until you're lying in bed at 2 a.m., surrounded by people who care, and still feel like you're disappearing. Psychiatrist Irvin Yalom wrote, "The deepest existential fear is not death, but the terror of being disconnected." And you start to understand that. You start to feel it in places no affirmation can reach, because we were never taught how to stay with ourselves, let alone with each other. So we overfill our calendars, we join groups, we text back, we keep moving, but the speed only amplifies the silence inside. The emptiness echoes louder the busier we get. Because it's not people you're missing, it's recognition. It's someone saying, "I see who you are beneath all of this, and I won't turn away." But most people can't give that, not because they don't care, but because they've never received it themselves. They're lonely too. They're buried in personas. They've also forgotten what it means to be fully met. And so we pass each other like ghosts, smiling, waving, interacting, but never touching. You could be in a room full of friends and still feel like you're fading, because no one's looking beyond the surface. No one's asking what hurts. No one's asking who you really are beneath the roles. We are lonely because we are unmirrored, because we have become self-edited versions of our pain. We present only what is safe, only what is useful, only what doesn't disrupt the image they've come to expect. And then we wonder why no one really knows us. Real connection cannot happen when we're busy being easy to like. It requires mess, the things we've been taught to suppress. And here's the paradox. The more we hide, the more we disappear. The more we smile through it, the more we reinforce the lie that we're fine. And when someone finally asks how we are, we've practiced being okay for so long that we forget how to be anything else. So loneliness grows not from the outside in, but from the inside out. It's not caused by being left behind. It's caused by abandoning ourselves, by forgetting how to speak in our native emotional language, by trading our own inner world for the approval of those who never earned access to it. Jung said the process of individuation, of becoming oneself, is a lonely path, not because we must be alone, but because very few will walk with us when we stop performing. The people who loved the role may leave when you become the author. The people who liked the version of you that never asked for much may fall silent when you begin to ask. But that silence, it's sacred. That silence means you're getting closer to truth, and truth is magnetic. It pulls the right people toward it, slowly, quietly, honestly. So if you feel more alone than ever, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just becoming real. The way iron rings hollow until it's struck. The way a forest grows roots before it grows branches. The way connection, real connection, only begins where the mask ends. And yes, It hurts. It's terrifying to be unfiltered in a world that filters everything, but it's the only way out, because there is no algorithm for being known, no shortcut to being felt. You have to show up in your full, messy, unlabeled self and risk the quiet, risk the rejection, risk being misunderstood. Only then can you know who's truly listening. Only then can you know you're not alone because someone told you, but because someone stayed. Not for your performance, not for your reliability, not for the version of you they could benefit from, but for your essence, your stillness, your unspoken. So when the nights are quiet and the ache returns, remember this: the ache is honest. The ache is proof that something in you still wants to be known. That's not weakness. That's your soul refusing to disappear. And that ache, more than any text, any follower, any moment of applause, that ache is you. And the truth is, you are never too much. You are simply too deep for people who haven't learned how to swim. This isn't disconnection. This isn't a phase. This isn't about being broken. This is your depth asking to be met. This is your silence asking to be heard. This is your loneliness refusing to be filled with noise. This is the part of you still waiting for someone to say, "You're not hard to love, just hard to see." And maybe you've been hidden long enough. You want to be liked. Everyone does. That's the opening move, the silent handshake beneath every interaction. You don't say it out loud, but it pulses under every smile, every nod, every "I totally get it." It's not manipulation, not yet. It's adaptation, but adaptation has a cost, because slowly, without even meaning to, you begin to adjust your tone, you dilute your opinions, you ignore your gut. You learn which parts of you make people uncomfortable, and you bury them. You learn how to read the room, how to give what's wanted before it's even asked. You get good at it. So good, in fact, that no one notices you're shrinking, not even you. And that's the danger, because the most dangerous kind of manipulation isn't the one others do to you. It's the one you learn to do to yourself. You start saying yes before you've even checked how you feel. You start apologizing for needs you haven't voiced. You offer emotional labor like it's proof of your worth. You give, not because it's who you are, but because you're afraid of what will happen if you stop. In Machiavelli's world, power was never about brute force. It was about perception. Appear strong, appear generous, appear essential. Modern relationships are no different. We're all managing optics, trying to be liked, respected, needed. But when every interaction becomes a subtle game of negotiation, you start to wonder, are you connecting or are you just keeping score? Social exchange theory says that every relationship, no matter how intimate, involves cost and benefit. We calculate, unconsciously, who listens when I speak, who drains me when they vent, who uplifts and who erodes. But what happens when the exchange becomes uneven and you convince yourself that it's okay? What happens when you get less and give more, but call it love or loyalty or just being there? You become strategic, not out of malice, but survival. You mirror what works. You withhold what pushes people away. You build a version of yourself optimized for acceptance. And you don't notice that every time you choose to not speak up, not push back, not disappoint, you're not keeping the peace. You're forfeiting a piece of yourself, bit by bit, boundary by boundary, until eventually you can't tell the difference between love and tolerance, between trust and dependency, between comfort and control. We don't talk about how much power lives in small interactions, in timing, tone, omission. We don't talk about how charm can be a weapon, how kindness can be leveraged, how silence can manipulate more effectively than words. But we feel it. You've felt it. The subtle shifts, the way someone always finds a way to steer the conversation, the way they flatter you when they need something, the way they withdraw when you say no. It's not abuse, it's not overt, it's social intuition, sharpened and turned inward. And we reward it. We reward those who are good with people, who can read the room, who know how to get a yes without asking directly. But Machiavelli warned us. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. In other words, strategy always wins when sincerity costs too much. And in modern relationships, sincerity costs a lot. It costs comfort. It costs predictability. It costs control. So instead, we strategize. We orbit around truth. We signal instead of speaking plainly. We wait for others to get the hint, rather than risk rejection. We stop asking directly. We start managing outcomes. And we call that maturity. But it's not maturity, it's fear. Fear of rupture, fear of being seen as difficult, fear of being alone. And in that fear, we learn to trade our boundaries for belonging, until we can't tell if the people around us love us or just love that we never say no. This is the part no one teaches you, that relationships, when left unexamined, become systems of mutual control. That every good vibe may be hiding an emotional economy of pressure, debt, and strategic compliance. That even kindness, when mixed with insecurity, can become a method of control. You think, I'll give more so they'll never leave. I'll stay agreeable so they won't turn cold. I'll say yes, so I'm not the problem. You become valuable by being invisible, predictable, easy, and the people who benefit from that will call you low maintenance. But the truth is, you've been over-functioning so long they've forgotten you even have boundaries. And when you finally draw one, they don't see it as healthy, they see it as betrayal. Because their comfort depended on your silence. You were useful to them. Not whole, not complex, not inconvenient. Useful. And usefulness is a dangerous foundation for love, because when your value is tied to what you provide, attention, availability, agreement, you lose the right to simply exist. You start managing perception full-time, and no one notices because you do it with a smile. But eventually, you burn out. You stop enjoying the relationships you once fought to keep. You become numb in spaces that used to feel safe. You dread the very messages you used to live for, because somewhere deep down you know you've been performing, and not for applause, for survival, for access, for the illusion of closeness. You start asking yourself, who am I if I stop being agreeable? If I stop being charming? If I stop keeping the peace? The answer is terrifying because it's unpracticed. But it's also necessary because the alternative is a life of invisible servitude, of people-pleasing dressed as emotional intelligence, of giving more and more to relationships that give less and less in return. Machiavelli also said it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But what if the real power isn't in being feared or loved, but in being real? Even when it costs you everything you used to call connection. Real connection requires friction. It requires truth. It requires ruptures that force repair, not silence that preserves control. And yes, that means you'll lose people. People who were never there for you, just for your compliance. People who liked that you were predictable, not present. People who never earned your openness, only expected it. Let them go, because the people who stay when you're inconvenient, those are the ones who were never playing the game. Those are the ones who don't need to win. They just want to know you. Not manage you, not mold you, know you. So ask yourself, how many of your relationships are built on who you are, not what you do for them? How many people would still call if you stopped being useful? How many would stay if you stopped performing? That's your real circle. That's your real power. And the next time you feel yourself bending, smiling when you want to go silent, saying yes when your gut says no, remember this. You are not difficult. You are not cold. You are not selfish. You are just no longer willing to be managed. This isn't strength. This isn't strategy. This isn't emotional mastery. This is a warning. Because when kindness becomes your currency, you'll always be underpaid. And when charm becomes your armor, no one will ever know where it hurts. And when silence becomes your strategy, you won't even hear yourself anymore. This isn't connection. This is diplomacy. This isn't peace. This is submission. And the truth is, you were never safe. You were just easy to control. You wake up. Check your messages, respond to whoever feels urgent, and carry on with your day. You cross paths with dozens of people, at work, online, in the store, on your commute. You nod, you smile, you make eye contact. But deep down, something feels different than it used to. Something colder, thinner, like the fabric between us is wearing out, like every interaction carries less weight than it should. You tell yourself it's normal, it's just modern life, but what if it's not? What if this thinness, this erosion of connection didn't just happen? What if it was engineered, not by malice but by momentum, not by evil but by evolution? We were never meant to live this way, not this fast, not this fragmented, not this replaceable. There was a time when connection wasn't a choice, it was survival. In the tribal world, your identity came from your place in the group. You weren't just you were someone's brother, someone's daughter, someone's hunter, healer, listener. You belonged, not because you were interesting, but because you were needed. That kind of connection wasn't based on charisma or compatibility, it was based on interdependence. And interdependence is sticky, it binds, it constrains, it keeps people tethered to each other, to roles, to rituals. And that came with limits. But it also came with certainty. Fast forward to now, to cities, to platforms, to networks, to lives built around options. You don't have to belong anymore. You can leave, you can move, you can block, mute, swipe, ghost. You can start over, again and again. Sounds like freedom, but it comes with a hidden cost. No one stays, no one has to, and so no one does. Sociologist Georg Simmel called this the blaze attitude of the modern city, the way we protect ourselves from overstimulation by numbing our attention. When everyone becomes a passing impression, you stop seeing anyone fully. You don't mean to dehumanize, you just adapt. Modernity gives us scale, but it steals depth. You can know thousands of people, you just can't be known by any of them fully. You can join dozens of groups, you just won't feel indispensable in any of them. Relationships become modular, swappable, disposable, and when people start treating each other as interchangeable, something collapses at the core of intimacy. Because connection requires context. It needs roots, it needs history, but in a world built for movement, we don't grow roots anymore. We build profiles. We craft identities designed to impress new people, not deepen with old ones. So we become socially agile and emotionally anonymous. We learn how to make friends fast, but we don't learn how to keep them. We know how to charm, but not how to stay. We're connected to everyone and anchored to no one. This is the great inversion. The more mobile our world becomes, the more fragile our bonds grow. Because the architecture of modern life rewards breadth, not depth, exposure, not commitment, speed, not reflection, and we mistake proximity for relationship. We confuse recognition for being known, and underneath it all, a deeper wound. You're never sure who actually cares, because no one needs you. Not really, not in a survival sense, not in a tribal sense. You're nice to have, you're enjoyable. But the second you become inconvenient, hard to reach, emotionally messy, you start to disappear from people's lives. Not with cruelty, just with silence, just with a slow fade. The algorithm forgets you, the group chat moves on, the birthday list skips your name, and the world keeps spinning like you were never in it. Machiavelli understood this. In a world driven by necessity, relationships are not about sentiment, they're about strategy. He warned that people will stay loyal only while it is useful to do so, and when the benefit fades, so will the bond. This isn't cynicism, it's a mirror. And in today's culture of transactional affection, we're all slowly becoming little princes, calculating, positioning, optimizing our likability, our accessibility, our emotional ROI. And the tragedy is we do it without even knowing. You show up to be seen, but you're never really met because no one is looking beyond what you can offer, and neither are you. We're not cruel, we're conditioned to be productive before present, engaging before sincere, visible before vulnerable. Because that's how attention works now. That's how relationships survive now. You keep feeding the system or it forgets you. So we adapt, we smooth the edges, we suppress the complexity, we shrink our truth to fit inside the screen, and we call that connection. But it's not. What we're really experiencing is a collapse of relational architecture, not just emotionally, but structurally. The neighborhood no longer matters. The workplace is remote, the family is scattered, the community is optional. Everything that once forced us into inconvenient, sustained, character-building relationships has been stripped away in favor of convenience, efficiency, and emotional self-regulation. And yes, it's easier, but it's also emptier, because when no relationship is necessary, no relationship is truly safe. You're always one inconvenience away from being replaced, and that knowledge, however quiet, lives in your body. You feel it when you hesitate to speak honestly, when you don't ask for help, when you edit yourself in the group. You're afraid, not of judgment, but of being forgotten, and that fear shapes every social instinct you have. You show up soft. You smile on cue. You leave before it gets too real, because you've learned that depth carries risk, and risk is expensive when everything is optional. Simmel predicted this. He said that the city makes us more intellectual, more rational, but less emotionally engaged. We protect ourselves by becoming spectators, observers, judges, critics, but not participants, not fully, not without calculation. And so the ties loosen, the rituals thin out, the spaces between us stretch, and we call that adulthood. But maybe it's not maturity, maybe it's erosion. Maybe the freedom to always move on is also the freedom to never truly arrive. Maybe the ability to connect with anyone is what prevents us from being known by someone. Maybe we were never meant to hold this many names, faces, invitations, and impressions in our minds at once. Maybe belonging doesn't scale. Maybe intimacy was never meant to be convenient. So what happens next? Do we keep performing presence while growing lonelier in the process? Do we keep optimizing relationships for speed and abandon the ones that slow us down? Do we keep replacing people every time it gets hard? Or do we stop? Do we remember that the relationships that change us most are rarely easy? That inconvenience is the soil of loyalty? That presence is a commitment, not a feature? Because something in us still remembers, still aches, still longs to be missed when we're absent, to be held when we're not useful, to be known when we're not performative. Something in us still wants the kind of closeness that doesn't scale, that can't be optimized, that has to be built, slowly, awkwardly, honestly, with people who choose to stay, not because you're easy, but because you're worth the effort. And maybe that's what we've forgotten, that the best kind of connection was never fast, it was never strategic, it was never painless, it was chosen, it was sacred, and it was hard. And the truth is, you were never emotionally distant. You were just born into a world that forgot how to hold anyone close. You're reliable. You're the one they call when things fall apart, the one who listens, who shows up, who softens conflict and fills silence. You've learned how to sense when something's off, how to phrase things gently, how to disappear your own needs just enough to keep the peace. People say you're kind, selfless, loyal, but inside you're tired. There's a fatigue that sleep doesn't touch, an ache that approval can't soothe, because deep down, you don't feel loved. You feel used, not in a malicious way, but in a quiet, systematic way. Like your worth was never about who you are, but what you provide. You've become the tool that keeps the machine running. And maybe the most painful part is, you let it happen. You trained people how to treat you by showing them you'll never say no, by being the one who always adjusts, always accommodates, always stays calm. You thought that was love, you thought that was maturity, but maybe it was survival. Maybe it was the only way you learned to be safe. So now you overfunction. You anticipate needs before they're voiced. You offer before being asked. You say it's okay when it's not. And people don't question it. Why would they? You've never asked them to. You've built a version of yourself that revolves around others, their comfort, their expectations, their timelines, their chaos. You absorb it all and vanish in the process. Carl Jung once wrote that what we repress doesn't disappear. It becomes our fate. And maybe this is your fate, to be chosen only for your utility, not your essence, to be invited into rooms because of what you can do, not because of who you are. You wonder why no one checks in on you, why no one holds space for your mess, why the moment you stop giving, the room grows cold. But you already know why. It's because usefulness is a currency, and you've been spending yourself to stay included, to stay safe, but it's costing you. Slowly, subtly, your identity starts to blur. You don't know what you want, only what's needed. You don't know how to ask, only how to offer. You don't know how to rest, only how to earn it. And that confusion isn't just personal, it's systemic. Society rewards this, especially if you're quiet, especially if you're female, especially if you were raised to believe your value lies in making others comfortable. You were taught to read the room, not to own it, to be liked, not to be known, to sacrifice, not to be seen. And so you became agreeable, polished, helpful, and slowly invisible. Machiavelli warned that when people are only useful, they are never safe, because the moment their function expires, so does their value. You weren't taught how to build boundaries, you were taught how to be pleasing. And so now even your kindness feels strategic, even your compassion feels rehearsed. You're performing warmth in hopes it will buy you love. But it doesn't. It buys you access. It buys you dependence. It buys you tasks, but not tenderness, not reciprocity, not rest. And now you're trapped. Trapped in the persona you crafted, trapped in the expectations you nurtured, trapped in the image of the one who holds it all together. And the irony is, no one asked you to be this. You made yourself this way because it felt safer than being fully seen. Because what if they saw your mess, your anger, your longing? What if they saw the parts of you that aren't graceful? Would they still stay? Would they still care? Or would they pull away like they always do when you stop being useful? This is the wound you carry, the belief that love must be earned, that existence is not enough, that your presence must always justify itself. And it shapes every interaction, every hesitation, every text you overthink, every apology you didn't need to give, every silence you fill out of fear it will turn into distance. Philosopher Simone de Beauvoir once said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman, a reflection of how identity is constructed through expectation." And maybe that's true for all of us. Maybe none of us were born tools, we became them. Through praise for being easy, through rewards for being low management, through relationships that only deepened when we stayed small. But now, you want more. You want to be known. You want to be held not just for your usefulness, but for your truth, for your full, inconvenient, complex self. But that requires change, and change is risky, because when you stop performing, people will notice. Some will feel betrayed, some will distance, some will say, "You've changed," and they'll be right, because for the first time, you're choosing honesty over harmony, boundaries over burnout, truth over transaction. And it's disorienting. At first, you'll feel selfish. At first, you'll feel unkind, because you've equated self-abandonment with love for so long that choosing yourself feels like betrayal. But it's not. It's returning. It's reclaiming. It's rebuilding a self that was never allowed to fully emerge. Jung called this individuation, the painful, necessary process of becoming whole. Not by being liked, but by being aligned. Not by being needed, but by being real. And realness is disruptive. It disturbs the systems that benefited from your silence. It unnerves the people who mistook your self-erasure for stability. It exposes the dynamics that only worked because you never pushed back. And now you're naming the roles, the patterns, the contracts you never consented to. You're saying no. You're saying, "I'm tired." You're saying, "I want love that sees me, even when I'm not easy." And that voice, that inconvenient, trembling, unapologetic voice, it's yours. And it matters because you're not a tool, you're not a buffer, you're not a character in someone else's comfort zone. You're a full, breathing, aching, deserving self. And anyone who only loved your usefulness never really loved you. The truth is, you were never too much. You were just too alive for people who only knew how to consume. You've just seen it, not a theory, not a trend, but a mirror held up to a society that talks endlessly about connection while quietly abandoning the very art of being with one another. We've mistaken messages for meaning, presence for performance, and kindness for compliance. From the illusion of intimacy to the ache of invisible loneliness, from the quiet control of emotional transactions to the fading of human bonds across generations. And at the center of it all, you, the part of you that's exhausted but polite, that's always there but never felt, that wants to scream, "See me," but whispers, "I'm fine." But maybe now, something has shifted. Maybe now you no longer want to play the part. Maybe you're ready to ask the real questions, not, "Am I good enough for them?" but, "Are these relationships good enough for the real me?" Not, "How do I stay likable?" but, "How do I stay whole?" Because the truth is, this isn't just about others. It's about reclaiming the authorship of your emotional life. It's about unlearning the roles you were handed. It's about remembering that you are not a placeholder in other people's stories. You are a person, messy, complex, beautiful, deserving of being seen, not for what you do, but for who you are. So before you scroll away, ask yourself, which part of you did this video awaken? And which part are you still afraid to show the world? Leave a comment, share your story. Tell us the moment you realized this isn't connection, this is survival. If this resonated, subscribe for more. If you felt seen, hit like. Not for the algorithm, but for the truth that just found you. And if you're ready to go deeper, we'll be right here, not to perform, not to impress, but to feel. Together. Because this isn't just content, this is a wake-up call. And maybe, just maybe, you're finally ready to answer.